happy full moon in Scorpio. Last night at 8:57 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on the 7th of May, we had a full moon in the sign of Scorpio. Now, full moons are a time where we experience maximum brightness, maximum illumination. Things in our life, in the themes of that moon, are going to actually be given a little bit of a spotlight. They're going to come to fruition. They're going to fall off the tree. We might gather together, maybe virtually in these days of COVID-19, but the full moon is a time where the seeds we planted at the new moon, consciously or unconsciously, and that we tended throughout the lunation, consciously or unconsciously, actually come to their full fruition. And so in this moon, we're really navigating the deep, fixed, watery energies of Scorpio. Scorpio is the sign in the zodiac that really connects us to death itself. And this is not a literal death. This idea of a metaphorical death is something that we can be really present with in a way that doesn't have to be only based on fear. There are many times in our lives where things have died, things have gone away, things have ceased to be for us anymore. And so we go through these processes where we die and we let things go. We release them, we shed them. This is all sort of both full moon and Scorpio themes. And we do that in order that there can be space and energy for rebirth. Now, this is powerful stuff. It's not always easy stuff. On the Taurus-Scorpio polarity, we're exploring these very real themes of life itself, of growth itself in Taurus, fixed earth. And then we're really also recognizing that there is this equal and opposite force, and that is death itself. That is what has to be shed and released in order that there's space for something else to grow. And that there's this life-death life cycle. The snake is eating its own tail, right? We're in this kind of very potent realm at the moment whenever we're in Scorpio and Taurus parts of our chart or of the wheel of the year. And so I really want to invite us to connect to some of these themes at the moment. In the new moon 2 weeks ago, you might have seen certain things in your life begin to be seeded, begin to be grown. You might have intentionally set some intentions and then watched and checked in with those throughout the last 2 weeks, or you might not have. And the thing is, with this kind of magic that I teach and talk about, it's practical magic for a pleasurable life, right? And we know that not everything is pleasurable, but there's also this invitation to try and find whatever it is that is pleasurable to us in our lives at any moment, no matter what is going on around us. And in the sign of Taurus, we're really connected to our sensual pleasures, the pleasures that can come, not always easily, but can come from being a human being here in the world. That might be the pleasure of actually tasting something delicious. It might be the pleasure of touching, beautiful sheets, or a piece of cloth or clothing that you really like, that makes you feel good. It might be relaxing in a bath, if that's your thing, if you're me. It could be anything, right? And a good smell that you were able to introduce into your space, ambient lighting. All of these things are the sense-based pleasures, and that's where Taurus is really an expert. It's an expert in really being a body in the world. And often it's not easy for us to be a body in the world. And it's not easy for us to be a soul in the world, or a brain in the world, or an adult in the world, or an inner child in the world, right? There's so much difficulty that can come with all of this. But we're in this full moon of this current lunation, this full moon in Scorpio. One of the things we're being asked to do, invited to do, is go right into those places in ourselves that are murky and that are hidden and that are freaky and that maybe make us feel uncomfortable. Fuck off, stay away. I don't want to be invited into my fear. I don't want to face all of the existential terror that I'm experiencing in a global pandemic. I want to just sleep. I want to just rest. I want to just be love and light and woo, and that's good, that's got a place, but that's not all of it. It's never all of it. We must always be looking to the other side of the wheel, to the other side of that infinity loop. In the soul-centered astrology that I practice and teach, we're always looking to the polarity, and that's why when I'm talking about the Taurus sun or the Scorpio moon, I always look at the opposite energy on the wheel. So if I'm in the sign of Aries, I always look to Libra, because Libra is the polarity, and Libra is the similar themes are being expressed, but from a very different perspective. And so I'm going to look to that energy in order to get insights and messages and clues as to some of the places that I can have growth and better understand myself or this current situation through this polarity and this opposite and this integration, this union, this synthesis of all the different parts of our wheel of the year, of our wheel of the zodiac, of our chart, and of ourselves, because this is this kind of hermetic principle. As above, so below, as in cosmos, so in psyche, in our soul and in this world are these mirrors and these sort of meaningful relationships. And so we can look to these invitations of the sky and of the planet and of nature to get more insights into some of the things that we might be supported to work with at this particular moment in our life. And it's Mars hour, so I might mention that this particular full moon in Scorpio has a very intense square to this planet Mars, which is in the sign of Aquarius. Now, a square energy is quite dynamic. It's quite challenging at times. There can be a bit of friction. It's growth through discomfort. And that's what we're all about in a magical, hermetic, soul-centered way, evolutionary way of living our lives. We're always invited into discomfort, and the question is always, what is the medicine here? What is the growth potential here? What is the teaching here? We don't have to always take the invitation to do that, absolutely not, but at any times that we're able to, we can actually begin to cultivate that orientation to the world around us when we're in experiences of discomfort, to go, well, what am I being asked to adapt? What am I being asked to change? What am I being asked to learn? What am I being asked to grow through? And our whole evolutionary history as a species, as a planet, has always been adaptability and growth in spite of challenge and through discomfort. It is usually those challenges that are experienced that actually signal the need to change and to adapt, and sometimes to let certain things go. To say, well, this fin isn't necessary anymore. These gills are not necessary anymore. What is it that I will benefit from instead? It's long, it's slow, it happens incrementally a lot of the time. And then sometimes there are these huge periods that shift. But in this full moon right now in the sign of Scorpio, we're really being pushed and challenged to actually take action, Mars, square, uncomfortable action, dynamic action, but it's in the sign of Aquarius, which is the sign of the collective, which is the sign of our freak, the sign of our genius, the sign of all the ways in which we are supported to use this precious mind and this precious heart to actually show up for ourselves and the world and the planet and all of these things that are part of our values, because our values are not an accident and our values are not an enemy either, even if they actually invite us to do the thing that's more effortful, to do the thing that's going to be a little bit more difficult, and to take this kind of action, not just be up here in our mind and think about it, but to actually take action towards it. So that Mars energy in Aquarius at the moment is putting this pressure and friction on our emotions, our moon, our lunar selves, and our emotions as they pertain to Scorpio themes, life, death, transformation, absolutely shedding the things that no longer support us, and also plumbing into the depths of our soul and all of the parts of ourselves that are so fucking gnarly and really keep us hooked and tied to so many things that are not actually helping us anymore, but that we can feel afraid of shedding those skins because it means that we've outgrown them. And so when we've outgrown our skin, what else have we outgrown? Have we outgrown our relationships? Have we outgrown our friendships? Have we outgrown our self-image, our stories, our family, whatever it is? And it doesn't mean that we let those things go. But there is a grief process and a process in which we actually have to recalibrate. And that's a lot of effort. And so we're not always trying to be on the path of least resistance. We're actually trying to invite ourselves to show up every day in a small, tiny way for our own evolution through discomfort, for our own soul's path here on this planet, here in this precious life that we're living. Another aspect that this moon is making is a really intense trine to Neptune in Pisces. It's a different kind of intensity. Trines flow, they're easy, right? But sometimes you can have too much of a good thing. So there can be an invitation in this energy then to go into our dreaming, into our Neptunian themes. This is oftentimes a more collective kind of energy, which can be also an invitation into delusion. It can be an invitation into intoxication, into numbing and drowning some of these parts of ourselves that are experiencing this discomfort, to want to actually go away from it all. And the invitation then is to send that rope out and to pull ourselves back, to not be lost in the fog. Neptune can be this real foggy illusion and delusion energy that makes us confused and makes us listen to things that are not actually correct, and makes us want to maybe drown out what it is that we're experiencing that we don't find comfortable, by going deeper and deeper into our own delusion, or into the delusion of these people that might want to keep us exactly where we are, disempowered. And another thing that's happening is that Persephone, the asteroid, is sitting right on top of Neptune, and they're both in the sign of Pisces. And Persephone in mythology was the one who actually was kidnapped and taken by Pluto, the lord of the underworld and one of the planetary rulers of Scorpio, and taken into the underworld, taken from her mother, taken from this beautiful life above ground, and forced into the underworld, forced to live there, and tricked into eating the seeds of the pomegranate that were from the underworld, and that meant that she would have to stay there forever. And this was something that caused her and her mother, Ceres, the goddess of agriculture, so much grief and pain. And there was, this really fucked experience that was had down in the underworld. And this is the energy of Venus as well, Persephone. And this is a story that has been told as Venus, the energy, has moved through the sky. And I bring Venus up because it relates to the polar sign of Scorpio, of Taurus, Scorpio's polar sign of Taurus, but it also is relevant because we're just having a Venus retrograde at the moment. So we're having to really understand that the energy of Venus is retrograding, and what that means is that it's not moving the way it ordinarily does. It's moving in quite a different way. And so in that way, what we're actually able to understand is that there are all of these invitations to be in these re-themes, remembering, revisiting, reworking, revising. All these re-words are relevant when a planet is in a retrograde apparent motion. And it's because they actually turn a little more inward and they shift how they are experienced. And so these stories of Venus, which just had its point of maximum brilliance in the sky a few days ago, is actually now able to become, so it's maximum brilliance as evening star, and from here it will retrograde and it will actually disappear from the sky, and when it comes back it will be morning star. And this is a story that cultures around the world, including Australian Indigenous people, many different nations, have their own story about this, and knew that this morning star and this evening star were the same planetary body. And it has this awesome, very interesting synodic cycle that is occurring, where it goes down below the horizon and it comes back up and appears not in the evening now, but now in the morning. And so we can actually look to these Venus themes, and Persephone and the story of Persephone and Pluto and Hades, the lord of the underworld, is one that we can actually look to recognize some of the themes we're being asked to work with on this Scorpio full moon, because there are parts of ourselves that we've locked away in the underworld that we don't actually believe have value and worth enough to be able to exist in both parts, to be able to visit with those underworld experiences and also come back up, and to be in this compromise that was eventually reached, wherein Persephone, Venus, would spend part of the time down in the underworld and part of the time on earth, above ground, because otherwise the principle of nurturance, the mother figure in this story series, would only ever be in grief and would never actually allow any of the flowers to grow, any of the fruits to grow that would feed the human beings on earth. And so a compromise had to be reached. And this compromise as an idea isn't only about what's fair, because life isn't fair, but compromise is the closest thing we can get to a win-win. Our fucking freaky underworld, deep, dark, intense experiences where things are hidden and they're unclear, they're not fucking going anywhere, especially not with a global pandemic going on. How is it that we can actually look that part of ourselves in the eye, meet its gaze, and say, you're still worthwhile, you still have value? And value is a really big theme of the Taurus-Scorpio polarity. In Taurus, we're really about our own values and finding what that is. And in Scorpio, it's really about other people's values and dominant cultural values that don't actually resonate with us. How can we actually transform those, transmute them? Because so many of us are holding and carrying these unconscious values and these hooks that keep us in the same fucking shit all the time that are not actually part of our value system. Doing a values audit is an amazing thing under this kind of full moon. And that's where you might actually sit down and say, well, what are my values? And how am I actually living and acting according to those? Is it a value of mine to grow and develop and become the best version of myself that I possibly can? If the answer is yes, what am I actually doing on a daily basis, on a regular basis, to make that a big, important priority in my life? And it doesn't have to be, enormous rituals or any of this shit. Practical magic for a pleasurable life, growing your magic to change your life, is about finding what it is that works for you, what it is that makes you feel lit up, what it is that actually supports you to do this fucking hard work, little by little, step by step, every single day at a time, because it is the only way that any change has ever occurred. And yes, there are times when we have these sweeping transformational moments, and we might sit and we might do a ceremony that makes us just like realize all these things or whatever it is, but it never has to be that complicated. The simple is where we start. The magic is in the mundane. And this is Taurus medicine, slow and steady. We're still in the sun sign of Taurus at the moment. And so we can understand that it is in this physical and material world that we are often invited to begin. And so what is it that we are asked to begin at this moment? What is it that we are asked to slow and steadily tend at this moment? And what is it that we are being asked to bring our fucking personal power, Scorpio, onto as this transformative potential, in order that we might actually grow, in order that we might actually change, in order that we might actually become more of the exquisite fucking people that we are, and actually be able to communicate this in a way that is authentic to ourselves and to the world. And I bring up communication because the final aspect of this moon that I'm going to mention is a very intense one as well. And this is an opposition with Mercury. Mercury in Taurus. So again, we're right back here on these themes. So we're having Mercury, our mind, our communicative function, our way of tracking and absorbing information about the world that we then use to communicate. So we might communicate our values through our mind, through our speech. This is all Mercury stuff. And Mercury is in this opposition right now, this maximum separation, this maximum tension with the energy of the full moon. So Mercury is in the sign of Taurus, the polar sign to the moon, and Scorpio is where we have our full moon. And so there's this opposition. Mercury right now is actually combust the sun. And what that means is that it's in this very close relationship with the sun, which it always is quite close to the sun compared to other planets. But it's so close that it's essentially in the heart of it. It's being swallowed by the sun. And what that means is that it actually expresses itself with so much more intensity. So we're actually, maybe we will experience under this full moon some communications that are a little bit more explosive, a little bit more challenging. And if that happens, it can invite us to be really ashamed. If we have words with our partner, maybe where we're just really frustrated and we speak in a way we ordinarily wouldn't want to, that's not really so much in our values, that's okay. Of course, we want to then try and come to a position where we're actually able to recognize that, to notice it, to name it, and to speak to it, and to sort of go under the lid, go under the hood if it's safe to do so. Or we might have an experience where our inner voice is fucking being an asshole to ourselves, to really be punishing itself, to be in this experience of, it's opposite the moon. So it's this more thinking self, and communicative self is opposite to this experience of our emotional self, our moon, our feelings. So we can have this experience maybe of our mind being a bully to our emotion. And that's not a problem. It's just not very enjoyable. But then sometimes what we do is we punish ourselves even more. And when we actually follow the language of astrology, we sometimes recognize that these invitations that are out there are experienced by each of us, but they're also just experienced by us as a collective. And just as much as I might be experiencing it, so too might my partner, so too might my friend, so too might my parent or my boss. So if you're at work right now, via Zoom or whatever, you might be experiencing more and more people having these quite intense ways of communicating with you. And, it's hard, but you don't always have to take it so personally. When you know astrology, you can understand that there are just these kind of energies that are out there, and that they can provide some context to why maybe this is stuff that is being experienced. And it's not so personal, and you're not just a failure. If there is one wish that I could have for this full moon, it is that we can all bring greater compassion to ourselves. If you haven't listened to it, a great thing to listen to under this full moon is the podcast episode by Brene Brown, who is a Scorpio sun, and always speaks to our vulnerability and our intensity as human beings, very much Scorpio themes. And digging underneath, she goes and she investigates and she gets the data, and she's been doing that for 20 fucking years, bringing it to the surface and giving it names. And she just made a new podcast, and in the first episode is called FFTs, which are fucking first times. And this is big fool energy, okay? And fucking first times are horrible. They're horrible because we're uncomfortable. We don't know what we're doing. We don't have any muscle memory. We don't have any memory. We have no mental models to rely on. And we're in a fucking first time right now with this global pandemic. And I'm in a fucking first time right now, launching my business and trying to speak to strangers and loved ones on the internet about this language of astrology and magic that is so much a part of my experience, and being fearful and ashamed and not sure about if I'm able to communicate about this, if I'm able to help anybody or be of service in any way by illuminating this framework for other folks. And so I would strongly encourage you to listen to that episode, because it's a wonderful framework for actually holding the vulnerability and the challenge and the difficulty of being in an experience where you don't fucking know what's going to happen, or how it is that you're meant to behave, or what's going to help, or any of that fucking shit. And you know, I want to be really open that we're in this very intense time, obviously, and that is also borne out by the astrology. And I don't pretend that I know what's going to happen or when or any of that, but you know, everything that I have had access to in terms of my astrology learning has shown me that these things have cycles. There is a beginning and a middle and an end, and even if we don't actually get to see that or know that, and even if that doesn't look like it's on a straight line, right, it's still a thing that we move through, and things are always changing. New shapes are always being made. New cycles are always beginning and ending. But right now, we're in this intersection moment where so many huge and significant astrological transits and cycles are being begun and ended. We've got many of the outer planets making new forms and new relationships and new aspects with our collective here on Earth. And so, you know, this stuff isn't necessarily going anywhere anytime soon, is what I'm trying to get at. These are big cosmic shifts, and so they have a much longer term turnaround and a much longer term set of invitations, messages, and lessons that we can actually learn. But they don't get learned quickly. They don't get learned overnight. This again, we can understand that we're in Taurus season right now, the sun season of Taurus, and we're asked to take this slow and steady medicine. And, you know, that's not always easy and it's not always fun, but what is it that we can actually show up for in our lives in a sustainable way, where we can actually continue to tend little by little and recognize that the seeds we're planting now during this fucking intense time are actually going to grow into something that we could never have even imagined. And that as much as we want to jump ahead to that point, it's not how it works. And I'm sorry to say it, because I would like to jump ahead out of this catastrophic experience as well, because it's not fun to be in existential crisis. It's not fun to be in discomfort. And the thing is, what we learn when we're in those times in our lives, and what we will learn as a collective during this time in our collective life, we never would have chosen it. We never would have learnt it if it was actually something where we had to put our hand up to go through all of this. It's just not a thing that we would do. And so in that way, we can often stagnate where we are. And this doesn't mean that it's good, and doesn't mean that, you know, we like it, but it's just what is. It is what is until it's not. And that is very hard, to be in that kind of acceptance. But there's a lot of people that have been cultivating, and a lot of cultures that have been cultivating this ability to be in, and tools for, and languages and stories around how we can actually be in discomfort and grow through it, find the medicine in it, how we can actually tend ourselves through uncertainty. And in my life, the biggest thing that I've been able to do to navigate a lot of the intensity and uncertainty that I've personally experienced for most of my life is to actually come into a greater relationship with your magic and your personal soul and your essence and your timing, and these voices in your head that aren't screaming at you that you're garbage, but instead these still, small, quiet voices that say, you have more answers than you know. You have more questions than you know. You have more time than you think. You have different lessons to learn than those you're choosing to. And you have a path here on earth that just because you don't know the destination of it, or even the next step, that you're still supported to show up in the present moment, in the here and now, and to actually go, okay, I'm available for this. Not 100% and not all the time, but I'm cultivating my ability to be available for this, because what I'm cultivating is a greater trust with myself and with the world around me, and with whatever my relationship is to this divine and sacred fucking planet that we're on, that we're part of, because we ourselves are the fucking captain of our ship, as much as we might not feel like it, and as much as we might be in these very real experiences externally that force us to show up and to be present, even and especially when we would rather go and hide under the covers, and there's a time and a place for that as well. But we're really invited to come into a greater trust. And when we're in trust, when we're in this experience, we're actually doing something that someone, Gottman, a theorist and writer, John Gottman, I think his name is, he said that when we trust, we make something important to us vulnerable to the behavior of others. And for me, when I'm sharing my magic with the world, sharing the language of astrology and tarot and the framework of practical magic as a way of living my life, I'm trusting that that's for a reason and that will help somebody else somewhere, because it's the thing that lights me up. It's the thing that makes me able to get up and to follow the path that is unwinding in front of me. And it's very fucking vulnerable, especially in these fucking first times. But when we do that, we're actually able to get this feedback, and not all of it is going to be good, and not all of it is going to make us feel good, but we get the feedback of actually living a life that is expressive of our essence, of what it is that we came here to do, what it is we came here to learn and to show and to grow and to feel and to reveal. And that feeling and revealing is so relevant to this Scorpio full moon. What is it that you are being invited to feel? The parts that are hard, the parts that are scary, the parts that you would rather not meet the gaze of. And what is it that they might reveal about yourself, about your truth, about your values, about what it is you came here to do and to learn and to be, and whether or not you can actually trust yourself and others to share from that place, to make something so important to you vulnerable to the behavior of others. I don't have the answer, but I'm going to keep asking the questions. And that's what Scorpio energy does. It's the great investigator, going deep, 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 all the way to the fucking core of the earth, to find that precious water that's there, to find all of that amazing, amazing life force energy that comes through death processes, from actually allowing parts of us to die, and to bring that sacred flame and then rise from those ashes like a fucking phoenix. And we might not be at that point yet with the global pandemic, or with fucking climate change, or with any of the very real existential threats that we're facing. But we take each next step, and that's all we can do. But we try and take that step compassionately, and we try and take the parts of ourselves that are scared and paralyzed and can't move by the hand and say, can we do it together? Can we do it together? And that's it. That's all we can do. But I hope that, I hope that some of what I've talked about is helpful. To end, I'll just do a little brief visitation with our body and our breath, and I'll invite you, if you'd like to do that with me. It'll just take a couple of minutes. I'm just going to close my eyes and hold a little bit of a space for a portal to be opened at this moment, for some of that intensity to be held, not necessarily in a way that's going to be challenging for us, but to just hold a little bit of space for the idea of it, and to ask that potentially we might have some of that that's ready to go at this moment. So please join me if you like. I'll just close my eyes and invite and invoke some of that. I call myself to myself. I call my cells to my cells. I call my heart to my heart and my soul to my soul. I call my relationship to all of the hidden places, all of the intense experiences. I call my fears in, and I honor them and I bow to them. I call in the soul in me, my divine essence. I call in everything that is for me at this time. And I call in release. I call in shedding. I call in fucking transformation. I call in the ability to transmute and transform all of that fear and intensity into sacred energy, sacred rage, sacred truth, sacred trust that I have then, that is available for me to take action. To take action despite discomfort, despite fear, and to take action not only for my personal transformation, healing, and revolution, but also for that of the collective. I'm willing to let some of my stories go, little by little, bit by bit. Some of the stories that keep me trapped and keep me feeling less than whole, when the truth is I am whole always. I can't help but be whole. I am always connected to the sacred and exquisite richness, the synthesis of every part of myself, every part of the world. I am the mountains, I am the valleys, I am the ocean, I am the trees, I am the flame, I am the wind, I'm the music. I call in patience. I call awareness at this moment to my jaw and my throat. This is the part of the body that is related to the sign of Taurus. I stretch it out. I open it wide. I make a sound. I make a sound. I have this gift of my voice, of my mind, of my truth. I take the hooks out of myself that are coming from the collective, from the culture, from other people's opinions, other people's values that are not my own. It's a lot. But I hold myself accountable. continuing to grow and evolve through this discomfort, little by little, bit by bit, because it is of my value. I value the process of becoming the best of myself and of helping the collective to do that as well in the way that I am called to. What is coming to fruition? What is being released? What is being illuminated? I invite some of that to come through over the next few days in its own sacred timing, and I open myself to notice the language of the universe, of synchronicity, and of symbolic signs that only I can read in the precious language I have with the world around me. I read the world as I read myself, with curiosity and interest, one word at a time, one symbol at a time, because it is what I came here to do. I call in this transformation. I call in this death process and this rebirth process to whatever degree it is going to support my highest evolution and the evolution of all of us through this intensity and uncertainty. And so it is. Thank you for being with me. I hope there's value in this for you. Take what works, leave the rest, and be well in any way that you can, because it's fucking wild out there. And try not to beat yourself up too much for the parts of you that are a little bit more afraid, because we have every right to be. But we still are cultivating presence through fear, presence through this discomfort, and the ability to act from our souls when we don't feel like acting at all. I love you all. Thank you, fellow travelers. Until next time.